Hello there, and welcome to Celestial Winter Gaming, your place for CDH gameplay. I'm Matt, Celestial Winter, and while this is normally your place for CDH gameplay, today got a different video going on for all of you. I am here with some very familiar faces. We got General Sarcasm and Young Hollow, also known as Logan, and we're going to be talking about a deck that they have built together. That is Y'shtola Knights Blessed. So why don't you two both go ahead and say hi?
Hello.
I
We're going to be doing a deck tech on Y'shtola. And General, would you like to go ahead and read Y'shtola for us all?
Absolutely. So your Stola Knight's Blessed costs one an Esper, so one a white, a blue, and a black, for a legendary creature Cat Warlock with Vigilance. And it says at the beginning of each instep, if a player lost four or more life this turn, you draw a card. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell with mana value 3 or greater, Y'shtola deals 2 damage to each opponent and you gain 2 life, with a 2/4 power and toughness.
Nice, nice. Yes, Y'shtola is definitely interesting. She's in the Esper colors. So I'll go ahead and pull her up here on my screen as well as we begin to start to chat about her. All right, so as we can see here, I brought up the deck list and we have Y'shtola on screen. And so, I mean, I guess my big question here right off the bat is, why Y'shtola? Why the Esper color combination?
Well, who doesn't want to play Cat Girls in CEDH?
There it
fair
is.
point.
Fair point. I mean,
Um,
you both built the you both have built the list together. What kind of made you come about this?
well, General was the first one who started it. We both value. gr- I I don't want to say we both value like the grindy mid range plan, but General was looking for something a while back that had to do with life tax totals and just that attrition game style. And he came to me and he said, "Help me build this deck." And I tend to find myself leaning more towards the mid-range grind, so I immediately fell in love with this game plan, this card, and it just bloomed from there.
Okay, General, what made you think about Y'shtola?
Yeah, I'd been interested in just a life stacks kind of game plan for a little while. Not necessarily stacks cards in the way of like rule of law, but stacks
Mhm.
cards in the way of just, gaining value or sort of punishing your opponents for casting spells and taking game actions that would overall progress them towards winning the game. So I was looking at maybe building a Najila list that was like a super crunchy kind of combat beats deck that could get away with playing Bloodchief Ascension or like an Esper kind of control shell. And for a while, I was looking through all of the Esper commanders that existed out there and trying to figure out which one would be good. And then Y'shtola was spoiled pretty much within like 2 or 3 weeks of me starting to try to carve out this new like deck archetype that I was working on. So Y'shtola being an Esper gives obviously the best win cons in the format in Thassa's Oracle and silences and all that. But it gives you an interesting avenue to play where you can make life totals matter for decks where it normally doesn't. And it actually becomes a viable control deck in CEDH. So it was a super interesting card the second I read it. I knew it was going to be the new best life total control kind of Esper CEDH deck. So it just did all the things I was interested in at the time.
Yeah, no, it definitely does all those things. I can having played against the deck a lot, I know from my own personal experience, there's been decks where I've played and my life total has never mattered before. Suddenly, I'm looking at 11 life and staring a Shieldred in the face, and I'm just like, what the fuck? So your main reason for picking Y'shtola over like other Esper commanders, so to speak, is mainly the whole like life stacks effect. And it's nice that Y'shtola does also have that little bit of extra card draw, stapled on.
Yeah, for sure. The life total aspect of it is the biggest draw to it. Like in terms of the Esper color pairings, it's definitely the most useful and like abusable ability for just like making life totals matter. And also having card advantage strapped to it is what makes it really like a CEDH deck.
Okay, nice. So, if people have seen my deck tech formats before, we're going to mix it up a little bit here, and we're going to kind of talk about the deck in each stages of the game, so to speak. And I think right now, honestly, the best place to start would be Mulligans. Wouldn't you both agree?
Yeah.
Sure.
Because I mean, you can't start the game without looking at mulligans, right?
Yeah, and that is fair.
All right, so before we, I have up on my screen here a test hand. Before we actually restart and everything, what are the main things that we're looking for with the mulligans in this deck?
I always joke around with this. I like to say I look for Ken Bauman approved hands. Shout out to Ken Bauman, the man. Um, but typically, what I try to look for when I'm playing Gestalt is at least two lands, a piece of ramp, some form of interaction, and some form of advantage piece. So, looking
Okay.
at this, God no.
Yeah, yeah. This is just haven't even talked about. This isn't the first seven yet. General, what about you though? What do you would you agree with this in the mulligan decisions?
Yeah, 100%. I tend to be a little bit greedier with my first and second seven than I probably should be in mulligans, so I look for a bit more acceleration than maybe you really even need. But yeah, definitely like an early advantage engine, if not some mana ramp. Like it's nice that your card advantage is in the command zone with this deck, but it's not like you have a Ristic Study in the command zone. You know,
Yeah.
Y'shtola makes you work harder to convert a hand into like a reasonable engine. So you're looking for something like a Fairy Mastermind or like an Archivist of Agma, or obviously Mystic Remoras or Ristic Studies are great pieces you're looking for.
Okay. Well then, let's go ahead and just take up our first seven here. So this is the first seven. I believe you both can see what I'm seeing, but I'm just going to read these cards off. We have Godless Shrine, Undercity Sewers, and Scrub Land as our lands. We have a Mox Amber, we have a Vanishing Knack, a Clever Impersonator, and a Drana and Lin.
Would you like to
Um,
retell us what a Ken Bauman approved hand is?
yeah, real quick, would you mind going to the playtest just so we could also figure out seat order? Because that is important when, at least for me, when going to a turn.
I guess that's a good point. All right, so we're
Oh, look at that. We're going first.
yeah, we'll be in seat one.
Ken Bauman approved hand, at least two lands, ramp, interaction, card draw.
Well,
That's typically what we try to look for.
okay,
This is almost there, but
yeah,
going seat one, I think it's because you can look at the clever impostomator as a Ristic Study, a Mystic Remora, something along those lines. But being in seat one, it's a little bit too slow for that.
okay. So both agree. We'll ship it back. Look at our second seven.
Yep, I'm almost tempted to keep this one, but like I said before, you kind of have to make Y'shtola work for you to draw the cards here, and with not having a spell that would trigger the second ability to be able to like go to combat and then cast one spell to start drawing cards, yeah, it's a hand that I would probably mulligan away.
All right, let's look at second seven then. All right, so now we have Mana Confluence, Godless Shrine, and Underground Sea as our lands, and then we have Drana and Linvala again. We have Lively Dirge, Angel's Grace, and Smothering.
My first take on this is that it has no acceleration, and so I'm kind of inclined to send it back, even though it's got cards I'm very interested in. Smothering Tithe is one of the best cards in our deck, and I think just one of the best cards in CEDH at all right now,
Yeah.
especially with our deck that has a little bit harder of a time ramping compared to my normal Rog Pilledness. So I would probably ship this one back as a second seven, but Logan, what do you think?
Yeah, the Smothering Tithe is a little bit blinding, but it's without getting it earlier than turn four, it's not really worth it.
Okay, so we'll go with six. Okay, so now for lands, we have Watery Grave, Underground River, and City of Brass, and then we have a Swan Song, a Vampiric Tutor, a Dranith Magistrate, and a Demonic.
This for a six, I would keep this.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Okay.
what to pitch would be the question, but one kind of like little side trick to note with your Stola is City of Brass and Underground River are continuous ping effects on yourself, which can help contribute towards the end step card draw. And shocks are the same.
That's
So
very
you're
true.
setting yourself up a little bit for like a consistent way to get those card draws, at least ways to help.
Okay.
And then the Swan Song, I would be probably tempted to bottom the demonic tutor.
Yeah, it depends on what pod you're into. If the Draenith
Mhm,
Magistrate is going to be very effective against whatever commanders you're playing against, I'd
Mhm.
be perfectly fine sending the Demonic Tutor back. But if it's
mhm.
decks where the commander kind of doesn't matter, then I'm
Probably
maybe
the
a little bit
vamp.
more inclined to keep the tutor.
Fair enough. That's
I
totally valid.
Yeah. Either way, you'll be getting that card draw aspect. You have the lands, um, and then you have the interaction in Swan Song.
Okay. Well, so we decided that we're keeping and debating on the pod is whether or not we pitch
Mhm.
the demonic or the Draenei. So all right, let's go ahead and start over. Let's see. First off, we'll be in seat 4 this time around. All right, so here we have a command tower, a godless shrine, and a sea of clouds as our lands. We have an imperial seal, a mental misstep, a Felwar stone, and a Timna the Weaver. Which I want to side note and say right now, Timna in the 99 is spicy. I love that.
It's put in some pretty good work in the games we've played it. A lot of the times,
Mhm.
especially because Y'shtola is vigilant and has such a big butt, you can get in for combat in almost every game that you're playing Y'shtola at least 2 or 3 times. So having Timna there to convert, just wanting to reduce people's life totals anyways to help you draw extra cards is nice. Losing the 2 life yourself if you hit 2 people with creatures and get Timna draws also counts towards their Y'shtola account as well. So there's lots of cute synergies that Timna works in there with kind of the game plan you're already trying to do. As
Yeah.
far as this hand goes, it's exactly a Ken Bauman approved hand. You know, the Imperial
Yeah.
Seal can find a Mystic Remora, it can find a Smothering Tithe. You know, depending on how good your draw is to you, this hand is
Mhm.
cracked. I'm keeping
Yeah,
this.
100% keep.
All right. Wow, that was pretty easy. Let's go ahead and do one more. Um, so this time around, we're in seat 2 again. Or, sorry, not again. We're in seat 2. And all right. Our opening 7, I mean, I'll read through it, but I already know the answer. We have no lands. I'm not you know what, I'm not gonna read through it. We have no lands. There's no way this is worth keeping, right?
You can't keep a
Or
no-lander.
no,
It
Yeah.
has every
100%
piece
no.
that I want to see between Esper Sentinel, Mockingbird, Mirror Maid, the new Emmet that we've been testing out. The Grand Abolisher I could care less about, and the Thoracle I could care less about, but I like all the other cards in this hand. If they were
Yeah.
2 lands instead, I'm keeping this every time.
Yeah. All right.
100%.
Second 7. Okay, so okay, so we have a ley line of anticipation, which could be a pregame. The only land we have is Exotic Orchard, and then we have a Soul Ring, a Mox Diamond, a Demonic Tutor, a Mental Misstep, and
I'm keeping this. I'm leyline blinded on this hand for sure.
a.
But you have the ability to untap on your turn 1 with Mox Diamond Soul Ring, and you could have demonic tutored for a land to get your Lotho off on turn 1 as well.
Yeah, I'm inclined to say the same. The ley line is a little bit blinding, and I've been burnt by it before, so I might go to a second 7, but
Well, this is currently our second 7. We'd be going to a 6 from here.
that's what
This
I
hand
said.
also ramps into
Oh,
an early
okay.
Y'shtola if you're assuming you're getting Lotho triggers around the first 2 turn
Yeah.
cycles. Like,
Mhm.
the fact that it also has the mental misstep to boot, I'm in love with this hand. This is exactly why we play Leyline of Anticipation.
Yeah.
You almost could even set up a demonic tutor for Rhystic Study and just do nothing. But on your turn 2, you've got Rhystic Study coming down with
Yeah.
a leyline in play.
Yeah, that's pretty hot. That's pretty hot. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't play decks that run Leyline, but that does sound very tempting to me. Okay, well, I mean, we talked about mulligans and the things we're looking at, and if we see Leyline, we're almost keeping. It seems like. Um, so, kind of leading into that, let's look at the early stages of the game. What are we trying to do with this deck in the early stages?
Well, if your name is Logan, then you're looking
Yeah.
to play any way to obtain an Undercity Sewers on turn 1,
Yes.
and any card that has Mox in the name. Most bonus points if it's a Chrome Mox.
That sounds like a Logan approved hand right there.
Mhm. 100%. The way I view early games is two plans. One, you're wanting to get that advantage down early, whether it be your Ristic, Esper, whatever it may be.
Mhm.
And then the other thing is you want to slow the game down because this deck pops off starting, I want to say, about turn four, turn five.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, you definitely have to be prepared to stop a win before you're going to be able to deploy
mhm,
anything that looks remotely threatening. It isn't just like incidental card draw.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's why you say, looking for interaction in your opening hand as well. Okay.
Mhm,
So early game, we're just trying to establish ourselves. We're looking for advantage. We're looking for mana acceleration. Try to get your Stola out early. Try to get cards out that start to punish people um, early.
mhm.
Okay. So moving on from kind of like the early game, what's are we looking at going into the mid game?
Mid game, you're wanting that those advantage pieces locked in. You're wanting a shield rig, a cabal, something that is like chipping away at those life totals
Hmm.
while also like keeping yourself fed. Um,
Yeah, I'd say like a pretty ideal sequencing to get down in a game is something like a Polywog Prodigy on turn one off of the back of a Moxen or some piece of acceleration, and then a Lotho to follow that up on like your turn two, so that you're evolving your Polywog Prodigy and also just getting an extra advantage engine down to where you're starting to sort of develop mana and cards, and having your commander that helps you out with the cards aspect of it means that we can focus on mana engines a little bit more, but we're certainly very hungry for cards.
Absolutely. I think right here, since we touched base on like cards that punish, so to speak, I don't think we really need to go into card advantage or mana advantage cards. Like everybody knows what Smothering Tithe is. Everybody knows what. But since we're kind of hinting at these cards a little bit, I do kind of want to cover a couple of them because we've referenced them now. Um, Cards that are punishing our opponents that are slowing the game down. What are some of those cards?
Well, if you want to look at like a hard stacks piece that we're able to play because we care so little about our activated abilities, that would be your Drana and Linvala. And in the same category as Drana and Linvala in terms of hard stacks pieces is Grafdigger's Cage.
Okay.
Um, while you've got Drana and Limbala pulled up,
Okay.
or Grafdigger's Cage, we can read either one of these.
Yeah.
But these are actual factual stacks pieces that just don't affect our deck really in any, I would say, meaningful way, because they do have small impacts on us. But for the most part, we're breaking parity on these by really not being affected by them and having them kind of fold into the plan of stopping some of the biggest win cons that are out there, or the biggest engines that are out there at the moment. So
Yeah.
Grafdigger's Cage is obviously 8 for Underworld Breach and creature to battlefield tutors, and essentially, well, the way it reads, creature cards in graveyards and libraries can't enter the battlefield, so it hates on reanimator effects as well.
Hmm.
And players can't cast spells from graveyards or libraries, so it shuts off things like flashing back Savine's Reclamation or Bolas's Citadel. A lot of the more potent ways to put a win together are kind of shut down by this little one mana artifact that, if we couldn't get a surveil land on our turn one, we can just put this down and move on with life because it's really not going to affect our game plan in any way.
Yeah. Yeah, this card definitely has put in work. Let's go ahead. We read Craft Figures. Let's go back up here to Drana and Linvala because I've had this card hose me a couple of times.
Yeah, so Drana and Linvala is essentially a curse totem effect, but stapled to a creature, and it's made asymmetric. But on top of that, you gain all of the activated abilities of all of your opponent's creatures that they are then locked out from using. So your Drana and Linvala would shut off anybody's Llanowar Elves, it would shut off their Birds of Paradise, it shuts off a Thrasios, and on top of that, you gain all of those effects for yourself.
Yeah, definitely pretty good. You have anything you want to add in to the Drana and Linvala there, Logan?
um, no, I mean, pretty much covered it. Like the fact that we get the abilities makes it just like so much better because you know, a lot of times when you're playing stacks, like breaking parity is the most important thing.
Hmm.
So being able to not only like have our own activated abilities for Ranger Captain and pop a we call it Pop Tart. I can't remember the name off the top of my head currently.
So after talking about Drana and Linvala, a couple of other cards that I kind of want to point out, while we're on this still on this topic of like hurting and slowing down our opponents, and the big one to me is I like this one right here, Cabal Consult of Allocation. I'm gonna go ahead and read this one because I have been on the receiving end of this way too much. So Cabal is a legendary human advisor. He's a 2/3 cost, a generic, a white, and a black. Says whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, that player loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Now, normally, this doesn't feel super impactful in a CDH game. Everybody has 40 life, and if games are ending on turn 3 or 4, that's not too much life getting lost, so to speak. But as we all know, the format has slowed down quite a bit, in my opinion. Have you guys felt like this card definitely performs well?
Yeah, so this was a me card that I wanted to add. It it kind of ties back to the importance of Dromlin Vala and Grafdigger's Cage in slowing down those wind cons because while they may not be as prevalent, um, storm decks. This
Mhm.
is the storm deck hater,
Yeah,
and it just also had the added benefit of being that consistent damage that Y'shtola needs to trigger the card draw aspect of her. It brings her life total up for Necropotence, which great, another solid card in this deck. And being able to find it off of Lively Dirge, which is our only reanimate, is such a clutch aspect too.
okay.
Yeah, I think a lot of the pieces that are important with basically all of our life total stacks effects is that because of Y'shtola, playing a card that would generally be seen as like dedicated storm hate, it makes more sense because decks are going to typically cast two non-creature spells in a turn if you're thinking that you're trying to win the game.
Mhm.
So if we're playing our deck correctly and we're setting up ourselves to be able to stop a win attempt or two before we think about trying to do that ourselves, then somebody's going to be losing 4 or 6 life a turn, and we're going to be able to get the card advantage off of Y'shtola just kind of incidentally by playing pieces that stop particular decks from winning the game entirely and also kind of layer nicely into our plan of just turning those kind of life total taxes into card draw for ourselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it definitely, I've definitely seen it work out to great effect. And then, I mean, the one other one that we can briefly touch on here, Shoulder of the Apocalypse. I mean, most people know what this card does at this point. Basically, whenever an opponent draws a card, they are losing 2 life, and whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life. Extreme hate, life total hate for card draw, and especially in a heavy Ristic Study world and Mystic Remorse, this card definitely feels like it puts in work.
Yeah, it's a pretty common play line for the Ristic Study player to be fed 15 or 20 cards. Whether they're drawing 15 or 20 cards manually or they just wind up with that as their hand size because they started with 7 or 8. In any case, adding 10 cards to your hand now costs you 20 life and probably feeds you Stola 3 or 4 cards over the course of the turn cycle between when you play your Ristic Study into a Shieldred.
Mhm.
Tim triggers now become instead of 1 to 3, 3 to 9. I think I did that math right. Depending on how many people they hit, it just all these things that people, you know, I don't want to say take for granted, but that are just like common things in this format become so much more taxing and need more consideration. Like, is this Timna attack worth it?
Yeah. You mentioned about that, and it's a funny thing because I've seen the play pattern happen because with you guys playing this deck specifically, where somebody will go for an attack and they won't attack you because it feels like it's just pointless because of how much life you're going to gain. Which I always try to argue that it's not pointless because that's just less life. And then I usually end up being the one who's getting attacked, regardless of whether or not I'm even playing black cards. Um, but I definitely think that, like you said, it's interesting with the amount of life you can gain. It almost makes it like pointless to attack you unless it's specifically for like a Timna trigger or an Agila trigger.
While we're talking about combat, the amount of times I've played Y'shtola into a blind pod and they've read the card and decided that they need to either not attack people or spread their attacks out and not hit the Nas player for 4 or more damage to keep us off of one card is a little bit ridiculous. But yeah, adding
Agreed.
extra pressure to the default game plan of pretty much every mid range deck in the format right now, which is Mulligan or Tutor for Rhystic Study or Mystic Remora in the early game as fast as possible,
Hmm.
and then turning that into our own card advantage in the form of Y'shtola, and then using that to then pressure life totals down to where you just are completely suffocated out of the game is a huge reason to play Shieldred, especially in a deck where we get away with it and abuse it, and then turn that hate into card advantage so that it's not just playing stacks, not breaking parity on it effectively enough, and losing to whoever can play the best under your stacks pieces.
Yeah.
Right.
So going back into kind of the stage of the game, so we were talking about the mid game, how we're trying to establish, in the early game we are trying to establish advantage and mana acceleration, and then here now in the mid game we're hopefully having your Sola out and at least one of these pieces at this point, whether it be the Drana Limbala or the Shield Grid, what have you. Is there any other cards that you feel particularly shine here in the mid?
In the mid game, in my opinion, the cards that shine the best are the same ones that we're targeting in the early game. You're
Mhm.
just playing multiple of them. So you'd get a big hitter like your Comball or your Shouldred on the battlefield, and you'd kind of supplement the card draw from that with like a Fairy Mastermind and an Esper Sentinel. And you'll just go through turn cycles where players are taking normal game actions, their life total is steadily decreasing, and your hand is slowly filling up from 7 cards to 12 cards to 15 cards to now you're untapping after a turn cycle where somebody tried to win with 20 cards in your hand and your children in play still.
Okay. Logan, how about you? What do you think about that?
I fully agree with Alex. One thing I am surprised he did not mention is Delny. Delny is the arguably best card. I want to say it'd be the secret commander, if anything. Um, Double draws off your Stola, 4 damage off a non-creature spell that's 3 or more. It doubles Kumbal, it doubles Esper, Fairy Mastermind. It basically touches every creature advantage piece in our deck,
Including the front side of Witch Enchanter.
including the front side of Witch Enchanter, which I think I have pulled off before.
Huh.
Yes, I was on the receiving end of that, and I had a Rhystic study, and I want to say it was either a Smothering Tithe or like a mirror made copy of Rhystic, and they both got blown up.
That is hilarious. That's that's hilarious. I love that.
Yeah, so we've talked about how decks that I play, like Rog Thras, are super synergy based in terms of like the actual execution of the game plan.
Mhm.
In Y'shtola, it's a lot more of the deck building is synergy focused. Like almost every creature that matters in the deck can be doubled by Delny because Delny is just the best card in our 99.
Yeah, I can definitely see it. Definitely doubles all of your creature advantage and what have you. Having covered the mid game a little bit, naturally we want to start progressing into the late game, and this is where you guys had said this is where your Stola kind of wants the game because your Stola wants to push into the late. So what are we looking at when we're getting at that point?
At this point, typically life totals are pretty much dwindling. So you could go a multitude of ways. You have your easy button, Oracle, Tainted Pact console. You could just continue the drain game by having these light taxing pieces and finishing people off. You have the Valley Flood Caller combos you could pull off, um, or one of my personal favorites. You use Mirror Maid and Smothering Tithe along with Fairy Mastermind, just like taking advantage of these layered advantage pieces to just essentially keep doing what you've been doing, but now in a finishing aspect of it.
Okay, fair
Yeah,
enough.
absolutely. With it being a life total pressure kind of deck, by the time we're making it into the late game, if Y'shtola is succeeding, generally people's life totals are hovering in the mid low 20s or below, depending on what kind of deck you're playing and what the specific tax piece is that we've put out.
Hmm.
And so just simply casting like a Necropotence with a Y'shtola in play now all of a sudden is dealing 3 extra damage to them. Over the course of the game, we've probably gotten up to 50 or 60 life, and we can just Necro for refilling our hand and pass the turn. And by you trying to get out from underneath all of our stacks effects, you're going to draw us more cards, you're going to cost yourself more life, and you're going to eventually smother yourself out of the game by way of trying to get out from underneath all the different stacks and tax effects that we can play.
Yeah. Okay. So I do actually want to put a pin in that real quick. Because you mentioned Necropotence. I just kind of want to call it out, although I feel I already know the answer. This is not the kind of deck that's trying to land an early Necro and Necro for 35 and win on the next turn, is it?
No,
Do we
no,
see Born
this
Upon a Wind in our instance?
I don't know. Do we? I don't think we do.
we do not. This is the fill your hand, maybe go a little bit over type of necro, the value necro, which we all joke about.
Hmm.
But the fun thing is an early necro is not a bad plan for the fact that it can trigger your Stola every turn.
Yep,
Pay
a
for
guaranteed draw 4, draw an extra
Yeah,
card is just such a huge value engine when your Stola is kind of the game plan of turn your cards all into extra value and maybe card draw. Being able to ding yourself for 4 every turn, especially when our other tax effects give us life back for the most part.
Hmm.
It's almost a net zero in your life total to be drawing extra cards every turn, like 5 extra cards every turn.
Okay.
The other fun thing with Necropotence is that one of the ways Y'shtola is able to close out the game is by using Valley Floodcaller in combination with either Banishing Knack or Retraction Helix, and taking advantage of that untap ability that Valley Floodcaller has to return Necropotence to your hand after you've used something like a Mox Amber to make infinite mana with this same loop. Now Necropotence is expel that when you cast it, you trigger Y'shtola. So the bottom text on Y'shtola you can use not just for the extra value off of Force of Will now making your opponents all take 2 damage, but it's also a way that you can use to win the game, like a food chain commander, but with Valley Floodcaller loops, which I think are in a very strong place in the meta.
Okay. Nice. So, you know, I want to call out something else real quick. I know I'm kind of chopping around a little bit, but I have a couple of questions that keep popping up. Um, I noticed the Y'shtola text says that Y'shtola deals the damage to each opponent in your game. Have you considered Curiosity
I'll let you take this one, Logan.
effect?
yeah. So the original version of this list did have the curiosity effects. I think we were on at least 3, I want to say. Um, and what we came to realize is while the effect is nice, you have to play a bad card that it has no discount, no immediate value, and then wait. And that just wasn't good enough.
That's fair.
Um, if we were to ever play one again, there is the Demir one that whenever a blue creature deals damage, draw a card. Whenever a black creature deals damage, discard a card. I think it's like Crypt of the Gas Lord, something along those lines. That might be the one I consider, but it's just for us, it wasn't the place we wanted to be in.
Okay.
Right. So if you look at some of the interaction pieces that we're running that are kind of outside of the norm, just to be able to trigger Y'shtola, we're running pieces like Dismember, we're running pieces like Snuff Out and Submerge. And so they're played in other decks in CEDH, but the way we're trying to use them is to trigger that Y'shtola ability. And if you run a curiosity effect, then there's kind of the temptation for you to just waste a piece of interaction because it's now a draw 3.
Hmm.
And that's really not the playstyle that I find working out the best over the course of the game. Like we're not trying to be a storm deck. If you're trying to play curiosity, there's the new Vivi that would do that significantly better than Y'shtola, even though every spell would be a draw 6 if you're triggering that Y'shtola text. There's just not enough relevant good free spells that cost enough mana and also have enough impact on the game to really make that what you want to focus around. Like we're saving our free interaction for stopping win attempts so that we can grind people's life totals into dust.
Mhm.
Okay, makes sense. So, I mean, I feel like basically, coming back to where we were talking about the end game. We basically talked about how you're trying to finish out the game. Um, in terms of trying to finish out the game, there's a two card combo I want to call out because I love that the deck plays it, and I think it's great with the game plan, and that is Mind Crank and Blood Chief. So I'm gonna read Blood Chief Ascension because I love this card. Blood Chief Ascension is a enchantment that costs just one black pip and says at the beginning of each end step, if an opponent lost two or more life this turn, you may put a quest counter on Blood Chief Ascension. And whenever a card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, if Blood Chief Ascension has three or more quest counters on it, you may have that player lose two life. If you do, you so first off, we can just stop right there. I mean, I feel like this card just works great with the general game plan in general. Um, would you be playing this card even if you weren't playing Mindcrank?
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, Blood Chief Ascension is one of the cards that drew me to playing Y'shtola in the first place. And like I said, when I was talking about Najila at the start, is one of the cards that I thought I was the most interested in playing, like a kind of grindy, like combat beats, like make your life totals go away kind of deck.
Hmm.
Blood Chief Ascension is like the A1, like the standout card in doing that in CEDH.
This card has definitely killed me. I know that. Um, and then we've referenced it. So Mindcrank artifact costs two generic. Says whenever an opponent loses life, that player puts that many cards from the top of his or her library into his or her graveyard. Logan, you care to explain how exactly these two cards win together?
Yeah. So once you get three counters on your Blood Chief Ascension, every card that's going to the graveyard triggers Blood Chief. Now, the fun thing is Mind Crank triggers off of Life Loss, which is what Blood Chief does. So, card goes to the graveyard, someone loses two life. Mind Crank triggers, mills two, rinse, wash, repeat, and you have yourself an infinite loop.
That's awesome. I love that. Have either of you successfully pulled off this combo?
Yes, I have.
I wouldn't
A
say it's our
couple
most
like
common win, but I've definitely won with it numerous times.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I know it's not the common win. But seeing as how we're kind of talking about closing things out, and like I said, to me personally, I love these two cards winning together. I think it's really fun. And I love Blood Chief Ascension. I love that in
Mhm.
general.
It's one of the cards that I like that we get to play because I don't normally play a lot of decks that have black in the color pairings. So having access to Demonic Tutor, Vampiric Tutor, Imperial Seal, it's nice to have a plus B to a very good card that I would just play anyways
Mhm.
in Blood Chief Ascension. Like that card is a staple in this deck. It's not going anywhere. Even if we decide Mindcrank isn't good enough at some point and it gets pulled out, having the ability to demonic tutor for Mindcrank and put down the plus B on the table and make everybody answer it or lose the game is a great feeling.
I have
the
def
added
Go
the
ahead.
added thing I want to bring up, and this ties back to the hosing other people's game plans. Mind Crank shuts off Vampiric Tutors and Imperial Seals because the life loss is part of the resolution of the spell. So once the card is on top, the Mind Crank will trigger and you have to mill it immediately.
Yeah, that'll definitely do it. I love that. Yeah, Mindcrank, all that stuff. It's definitely fun. So, is there anything more that you guys kind of want to say about like the late game? Any other stuff you kind of want to call out?
I think we've touched on it pretty well. It really is just a continuation of the mid game plan. Like in some decks you'll see that after turn 4 or turn 5 they change the plan from putting down advantage engines to trying to land a grand abolisher and push through your Thassa's Oracle win. In Y'shtola, you really have no pressure to do that. Your game plan is making everybody else's life totals dwindle down to zero. So if we're gaining advantage in the rate that we feel like we need to be, you can continue just putting down more advantage pieces and sitting behind your draw engines and have the ability to stop every win that gets put in front of you until everybody reduces their own life total down to zero.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's no need to hunt for a window when you don't ever care to make one or you don't need to take advantage of one.
Logan, you have anything else to add to that?
No, I am a big fan of the fact that you do not have to push in this deck. It just kind of falls in your lap.
See, and to me, that is just so like
It's the antithesis of Celestial Winter
it is
Gaming.
the antithesis of Celestial Winter Gaming, like 100%. Because I love pushing for a win. Yeah. But regardless, this isn't my deck. This is your guys' deck. I still think the deck is really sweet. So to kind of like loop that all back together, um, basically, it feels like your Stola is. I don't want to lump it in with other Esper decks, but I feel like Esper decks in general are kind of all along this same game plan. I feel like most Esper decks are running slower than the rest of them, but your Stola has the added benefit of like really trying to tax the life tools and everything. And so you're kind of just like early game looking for advantage, like landing everything and trying to slow the game down a little bit. And then in the mid game, you're trying to add more pressure, whether that be, more pressure to the life total or more pressure to preventing your opponents from doing. And then in the late game, you're kind of just amping that pressure up to 11 because if you make it at that point, your opponents, like you said, are probably in the low 20s or lower than that. You probably have at least 6, 7 cards in hand and just kind of waiting for them to all slowly die out. You feel like that's a pretty accurate recap?
I think so. Yeah. To compare it to something like a Malcolm Timna or like a Tivit, because they're in the same color pairing, so you get access to the same card pool.
Mhm.
The real difference is exactly the life tax part of it. We're sitting behind the same draw engines, but our spells that we're playing on turn 3 are going to look different, and we're playing more interaction than those decks, I would say, or at least more free interaction, anyways, because we really are just able to sit and pretty much just play the advantage game. And if our opponents decide to punt into our tax effects, then we get to benefit off of that as well.
Absolutely. Logan, how do you feel about all that?
Yeah, 100% agree. The the thing I do love about this deck is while it has a game plan, and this is not to call out other decks, but as as different from Malcolm Timna, which is kind of just like the pure value engine grind. It's not locking us into a game plan like I say something like Tivit would, where you
Mhm.
have that 2 card combo or 1 card combo with Time Sieve. So you get this weird theme, but also sort of flexibility in the deck.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely looks like that. And then looking at a bunch of the cards here, you're talking about flexibility, and I've held off long enough. There's a few cards that I really want to ask you guys uh, what they are and what they're doing, and they're all from the Final Fantasy set. So I know that you're just trying them out, but I really want to bring attention to them because I personally haven't seen them yet. And the first one is whatever the fuck this is. Something like Pop Tart or something.
Yeah, so this is Papalina Totolimo. It's a 2 mana. It's the same mana cost as Lotho for a 1/2 instead of a 2/1, but it's got interesting text on it because whenever you cast any non-creature spell, it deals 1 damage to each opponent, and you also gain 1 life off of your spells. So it's a slightly nerfed Y'shtola text, but also it triggers off of every non-creature. So it triggers off of Swan Songs and Flusterstorms, not just the bigger free spells, and it's got the extra bonus of an activated ability that you can sack it, and each opponent who lost life this turn, which is likely all of them, have to sacrifice a creature with the greatest power among creatures they control. So it's an extra kind of board removal kind of interaction piece that also layers into the life total tax effects and getting us closer to having Y'shtola draw us cards in every end step.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. Have you guys had the chance to play around with it much? Have you had the chance to see it in action?
Uh, there was a day a couple days ago where it was General's turn to play the deck, and he had it out, and it was putting in work.
Yeah.
Um, we didn't get to see the activated ability because I don't think it was too relevant for that game, but every spell taking causing 3 life loss was just somehow so much worse than 2 damage. It felt like the dwindling was just that much faster.
Okay.
Yeah, it's worth noting that we didn't replace a different life tax effect to put this card in. We added it in on top of all of the rest of them.
Hmm.
So where Y'shtola is normally dealing 2 damage or 4 with Thelny, this creature being added in now adds a third damage onto that, or a sixth damage with Thelny in play. So it really does like kind of provide that extra little boost of a reasonably good turn two play that's going to turn our life tax engines on, that it needs Orzhov pips, but we're probably going to get those anyways, and we already prioritize our blue lands for our counter spells. So this likely lends us to a turn 3 or 4 Y'shtola as well, and just kind of nicely layers into the plan of what exactly we're trying to do.
Okay, definitely interesting. I know I personally haven't seen it in play yet, but I'm excited to see how it plays out for you. Next one I want to call out is Emmett Selch of the Third Seat. I kind of have an idea of what this card is doing, but General, you care to read it for us all?
Sure. So this one's a 4 mana creature. It has the same mana cost as Tally, and it's 2 and a Dimir for a 3/4 legendary creature Elder Wizard. And it reads that spells you cast from your graveyard cost 2 less to cast, which is only relevant in our deck because of the extra text on the card, which says whenever one or more opponents lose life, you may cast target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard. If that spell would be put in your graveyard, exile it instead. Do this only once each turn. So we're triggering this likely every turn that we're interacting with somebody.
Okay.
Or if we have different stacks effects on the board that don't require us to cast our own spells for players to lose life or for opponents to lose life, then it can trigger every turn. Like a Sheoldred, this triggers in every player's draw step now, and we're able to pick an instant or sorcery out of our graveyard that we want to recast. We're able to cast it on the spot because it does not tell us until end of turn, so this card breaks timing restrictions. And for our efforts, they're discounted by 2 mana as well.
Okay, definitely seems effective. Who's which of you two? Whose idea was it to put this in the deck, or did you both agree it was worth trying out?
So the the 3 cards that you were gonna be talking about were all brought up by me.
Hmm.
Um, I got bored and decided to scroll EDH Rec, which is how I found Papalymo Totolimo and the 3rd card we're gonna be talking about, and this card was the first card on the Play to Win set review, and immediately I'm just like, "Hey, this could be cool."
Okay. Have you had the
Because we
chance?
were
Sorry, go ahead.
oh, sorry. We were looking for a swap for Talion because it just always felt bad, and
I, that actually was the next thing I wanted to ask, and I'm glad you brought that up. So I noticed Italian is not in the deck, and you swapped out Italian for this one.
yeah, this was the Talion swap. Talion is a great card. It just, like I said, it always felt bad to cast. It was typically going under Chromoxes, and it just wasn't quite enough for me, at least.
Okay.
Yeah, that was one of the things that we noticed through the course of the probably close to 250 games that we've played on Y'shtola since the day she was spoiled. Every time Talion hit the battlefield, it was naming 2, and we were just not getting enough value off of it to really feel like it was worth the mana compared to something like Sheoldred, which really, I think, sets the standard for 4 mana creatures in our deck. So Emmet having the option to let us cast like a Time Twister in a player's upkeep if we have a Sheoldred in play for 1 blue mana and be able to deal 14 damage to each opponent in their upkeep or
That-
in their draw step rather feels like Christmas Land, but that's the potential of this card. And even just being able to reuse something like Dismember for free or Snuff Out again for free, because you can cast those cards and it's not something like an escape cost like what Underworld Breach provides, you're able to cast them for alternate casting costs.
okay. Yeah, that definitely sounds hot. And like you said, I can see why you'd want to take Talion out. It hurts my heart because I love Talion as a card, but I also can understand there's a reason why I don't play Talion as a command. And then let's go ahead and scroll down to the third card because this card, you guys will have to do some serious talking for me because I don't. I Logan, you know what? I'll let you go ahead and read this one because you said you brought these to the attention.
Gladly. This is transpose. Two in a black instant. Draw a card, then discard a card. You lose a life. If the spell is cast from your hand, create an 0/1 black wizard token. With whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this token deals 1 damage to each opponent. Rebound. If you cast a spell from your hand, exile it as a result. At the beginning of your next end step, you may cast this card from exile without paying its mana cost. So,
All right.
in going through spoilers.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. You know what? Here, let me say my piece real quick, and so you could say
Yeah.
why I'm wrong. So to me, this card feels like it's just not enough. It feels like at 3 mana, the effect just doesn't feel like it is enough to me. But I'm sure you guys have your reasons on why I'm wrong. Go ahead and continue.
So 3 mana is a lot. The slot this replaced was stock up, which was a sort of flex slot of just like extra card advantage.
Hmm.
The reason I wanted to try this instead of stock up, one is it's an instant, which better because we have the option to hold up for interaction on other turns, and if we don't need it, we just rip this.
Okay.
Uh, the 3 mana aspect triggers Y'shtola game plan, obviously important. And it happens twice, which is cool. Separate turns, yes, but it could either finish off a trigger on someone's turn and then start one on yours or something along those lines. The main reason why I wanted to try this card was the Black Wizard token it makes, because for the same reason as Papalingo Totalimo, it's just pushing that grind value further.
Okay. I mean, like you said, it's definitely I can see the reasons for wanting to try it out. And especially if it was replacing personally, I love stock up, but the main deck that I love it in tries to abuse stock up way more. So as opposed to Ishtola, which stock up is kind of a one-off thing. So I can understand wanting to pull that out to give this one a try. And that wizard, again, the damage is right in line with the game. And so if I'm right about this correctly, you would cast this spell. Let's say you cast on the end step before yours. You cast it, you create the wizard. Go to your upkeep, the rebound happens, so that will also trigger the wizard and trigger your Stola. So you're guaranteed, right? Your Stola needs 3 to do the
Y'shtola needs 4
4.
damage.
4, my bad. Okay.
So I want to take a point to emphasize what you've just said about the card.
Hmm.
Casting it in the end step before your turn is something that stock up could never do.
Okay.
Being
Yes.
sorcery speed, I think, is the downfall of that card relative to transpose in our deck.
Okay.
Committing 3 mana to something in a deck that doesn't generate 50 mana is a big investment, but also being able to interact with every win con that goes around the table is also highly relevant for us. So, but choosing between stock up and holding up Swansong is almost an impossible choice because you might find more free interaction or you might have just bricked yourself from being able to interact for a turn cycle.
Yeah.
So, being able to cast transpose at instant speed is just that much significantly better, um, to where the effects on the card for transpose resolving are debatably worse than stock up. I think for our deck they're actually better in the long game, but in terms of the actual effect of the one spell, stock up is arguably better. Purely the sorcery speed aspect of it, I think, defeats the kind of layering in nicely to our game plan that transpose really falls in nicely to. So because we can cast this in our end step, the impact it's able to have on the game, I think, is significantly higher.
Yeah. No.
One
And
slight correction I want to add to both to you.
mhm.
Um, Casting at the end of second main is most likely what you're going to be wanting to do. That way, you could try to guarantee that you stole the trigger.
Yep, that's actually a great point. So things like Blood Chief Ascension quest counters are a little bit of an odd kind of timing nombo with Y'shtola sometimes
Mhm.
because Y'shtola triggers at the beginning of the end step. It doesn't trigger at the beginning of the cleanup step.
Mhm.
So if any end step triggers are happening to like turn Blood Chief Ascension on for somebody's turn, and then they mill cards in their cleanup and take damage off of it, it doesn't retroactively trigger Y'shtola to give you a draw. So there are sometimes a little bit of nombos to where you're casting spells at what feel like weird times, But when a player goes to move from their second main to their end step is exactly when you would want to cast transpose if it's going to be the difference in your Y'shtola drawing you a card or not.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. I see what you're saying. And then again, like you said, back to the whole comparison to the stock up thing. I definitely can't argue with you guys there. Istola is trying to control, especially like you mentioned, your interaction package is a lot more than the average deck. So being able to hold up that mana is important as opposed to just committing to a stock up and hoping that somebody doesn't go for the after that. I mean, I'm not entirely sold on the card. I think, but for your deck, I do see why it's there, and I'm interested to actually see it in play. I think that's a big reason why I'm not feeling sold on it. I actually haven't had the chance to see it happen, and also because like this deck is the opposite of anything I'm ever trying to do, so I already can't wrap my brain around everything completely.
So let me describe to you how I used this card for the first time and why I got enough of a high off of it that I'm not cutting it for a while.
Okay.
Going into my turn, I cast Transpose in. I guess I misplayed it because I think it was the end step of that turn that I cast it. Maybe I already had the Y'shtola trigger coming, but I cast it in the end step of the turn going into mine and created the wizard token. And on my turn, I cast a Time Twister. That was the whole game plan for my turn, was to cast Twister. So
Okay.
in the upkeep, I get the Transpose for free. So we've already dealt 3 damage between the Transpose dealing 1 from the Wizard token, the Transpose dealing 2 from the Y'shtola damage. The Time Twister cemented the Y'shtola trigger in the end step to give us that extra draw. It also refilled my hand to 7, and I twisted into Transpose. So I got to cast it again and create a second Wizard token, so now every single spell that would trigger Y'shtola guarantees a draw in every end step. And like Force of Will, now when I interact on the stack with my free spells, I'm guaranteeing that I'm drawing an extra card in the end step. But it becomes more and more relevant that now if there's a stack battle and I'm using Force of Will, Force of Negation, Mind Break Trap, I've just dealt 12 damage to all of my opponents.
Damn. That sounds like confirmation bias, but that also sounds really, really fucking hot. So
I definitely hit the high roll of it, but even like playing cards like Pop Tart, Papalita, Totolimo, just layer into the dealing extra damage to all of our opponents' effects that this Black Wizard token is pumping out extra damage for us as well.
yeah, no, and I think like you said, and like we mentioned with the deck, the layers, the extra stuff, all of that adding in together, um, is what makes it nice. Because while Pop Tart has the activating ability, I can't feel like that's going to be relevant in a lot of CDH games. So the layer damage is the main reason for it being in the deck. And then at that point, Transpose is really just Pop Tart for one more mana that also allows you to at least like exchange a card out of your hand.
Yeah, looting twice isn't nothing, and
Yeah.
it does have the text on the card that says you lose 1 life as well. So a typical play pattern on a turn where we know we're going to cast Y'shtola is to use a fetch land to fetch for a shock land,
Hmm.
which that in and of itself, shocking in the land that you fetched for deals you 3 damage of the 4 that you need. So if your turn is Y'shtola and then you somehow still have the mana for Transpose, then losing the additional 1 life on your turn can be relevant. It also, like if we're attacking with 3 creatures for Timna, if we're casting a spell that costs us life otherwise, like a Necropotence, then it can play into our effects nicely to where the 1 extra life loss on the card does matter for ourselves.
Okay. Well, I think we definitely covered Transpose enough. I'm definitely liking it more that you guys have talked about it. And I mean, looking over the list for me specifically, I'm not seeing too many more cards that I entirely want to call attention to. The rest of the stuff we've either already talked about or it's stuff that you're just expected to see as per shell. Is there any cards we haven't talked about yet that you guys want to
I'd just love to hear Logan talk about Drannith Magistrate some more.
bring?
I do love this card. Yeah, Drain of Magistrate is just such an amazing stacks piece, both early game, late, mid game, and late game, because it has different like capabilities just to create stop points. Shutting out the early commanders, stopping like the quick breach game, stopping the what's it called? Bolus' Citadel towards the end game. It's just such a great stacks piece.
Oh, I fucking hate this card. I fucking hate this card because this card hoses almost every single deck that I'm attempting to play. So I
One of my
What
go ahead.
One of my favorite things about Drannith Magistrate is that a lot of the decks that complain about it so much play effects like Gilded Drake or just kill spells like Lightning Bolt to remove it. But the thing that people always joke about is cloning Drannith Magistrate to lock everybody out of their commander. But that kind of brings me into a great thing that I think about our deck is that it's very much not weak to almost any stacks effects, really. Null rods don't hurt us that much. Curse totems don't hurt us that much. Drannith Magistrate doesn't really hurt us that much. Like, it's the game plan that we've built to tax life totals is kind of irrelevant to whatever effects we're playing under. Like, Y'shtola would happily play under a rule of law as well.
Mhm.
There's it's a deck that doesn't feel like it can get blown out as severely as a lot of other decks by a single stacks piece. So while
we
we
don't
might
really
lose pretty hard to something like a Toxic Deluge for 12 and just wiping our entire board, we can recover from that pretty easily as well.
we
I,
also have the added benefit of, even though we're a card draw deck, Bowman doesn't really hurt us. In fact, it can help us kind of by people pinging our own life total and us still getting the card draw.
mhm.
Right. With this deck, you're really not as afraid to play one toughness creatures because the quality of the creatures is just that high when you're in the Esper colors. Like Esper Sentinel, Mockingbird, Lotho, Fairy Mastermind, and Orcish Bowmasters, I think are our one toughness creatures. And there's just no argument for any of those to come out of the deck.
Oh yeah, absolutely not. And then Mockingbird. I mean, most often Mockingbird is just going to be another Esper Sentinel, but it's not always going to have that one. So definitely, I mean, I think that's I think that's a really great thing to call out. And another thing that I again also would like to stress, not being weak to one singular stacks piece is really a huge thing. Especially coming from a turbo player like myself who falls over to the majority of stacks pieces that exist out there. I think not falling to any stacks pieces and being able to play a lot of them yourself is a really big strength of the deck. And I think something that we I also would like to reinforce. To me personally, that is the strongest selling point of the deck to me is the fact that any stacks piece. I mean, obviously, like you said, some of them can bother a little bit, but by and large, like you don't really care about any of the stacks pieces. And to me, that's the big selling point because most of the time when I'm playing a game, I'm losing because of the stacks piece or my own stupidity. Um, and I like to see a deck that doesn't have to worry about any other stacks pieces coming down.
Yeah, the elephant in the room when I make that comment is Blood Moon, but I've got a
Yeah,
particularly strong opinion that playing Blood Moon in the meta as it exists now is a sadistic form of king making.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've never played a game where Blood Moon was played where it didn't, like you said,
immediately feed someone else.
yeah, like the one player who wasn't the Blood Moon player just was significantly on top because of it.
And I say that as a person who has a deck together that has a Blood Moon in it. My Magda list plays Blood Moon. I cut Magus of the Moon from the list because I didn't like the effect that much, but I'm very careful about when I deploy Blood Moon to make sure that essentially if anybody has a colored mana rock, I'm just not casting that spell anymore.
Yeah, honestly. Um, well, I mean, I feel like we've covered pretty much everything about the deck. Is there anything you guys would like to add into the deck? Any other closing thoughts or any other cards that you want to call out that we haven't called out yet?
Let's
Um,
talk about the MDFCs.
MDFCs. Okay.
yeah,
So largely the MDFCs that we can play in our deck are more or less just because they are uh, basic lands with extra text that say when this comes into play, you take 3 damage. Sink into Stupor is a perfectly playable spell, but we also love the fact that it says Lightning Bolt yourself for a basic island. It can function as mana ramp or a spell when you're looking at your hand, so it's kind of similar to Otawara or like the inverse of Otawara.
Hmm.
And Witch Enchanter is another effect that lets us destroy somebody else's advantage engines that could potentially be beating our kind of life total stacks plan. But also, it's just going to be a basic planes more of the time that says take 3 damage, and now your talisman that you played a turn ago is going to be your fourth pip to get your Stola to start drawing you cards.
Nice. I love that. Those are the only two MDFCs that you're
So we've
testing.
considered playing additional ones in the past. I know Logan is a big proponent of Fel the Profane, and I don't necessarily think we gave it enough testing. I was pretty egregiously against Fel the Profane in the deck because this 4 mana spell just feels so bad. But there are definitely like that's one of the areas that we're of particular interest in whenever new MDFCs come out of all of the bolt ones. If they're close to playable, we'll probably try them out.
Okay.
While you're in the instance,
Mhm.
dismember and snuff out, the life total aspect to them, I just want to point out, are not free, but not as bad because you're paying 4 life for both of them, but you're getting 2 life back for your Stola, so it's a lot less of an ask, which I think is a great aspect to this deck.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, and then you'll also
and
end up getting a Y'shtola trigger for the card draw at the
mhm,
end step
yeah,
because you lost 4 life.
Yeah, that is
but
actually a point I wanted to make while we were talking about our kind of higher than normal interaction count.
Hmm.
Is that when you think of like a Talion deck that plays a lot of interaction compared to a typical CEDH deck, the things that they're typically adding are like smaller, more efficient counter spells. Like you'll see decks that play like a Spell Pierce or a Dispel or a Miscast or even like an Offer You Can't Refuse, just kind of like 1 mana, pretty versatile counter spells that aren't necessarily great. The gold standard obviously is Force of Will, but the majority of cards that we're adding into our interaction package are close to free or free in the form of Snuff Out, Submerge, and Dismember. Those are all pieces of onboard interaction rather than like 1 mana counter spells. But the nice part of them is kind of exactly what Logan mentioned, is that you're getting your Stola triggers off of them. The ones that are free because you can pay life really don't cost as much life. As long as your life total is like 4, then you or 5, you could cast them and you're going to gain 2 life back from the Tola trigger right away. But really, there's never a situation where your life total is going to get that far down.
Makes sense. So actually, now that we're here looking at the instance, I do see one card that I do kind of want to ask about a little bit because to me it feels out of place in the deck, and that's actually Dark Ritual. To me, Dark Ritual is very much a turbo card, a card you're going to see in decks that are trying to turbo or do ad nos things or whatever. Um, to me, that feels a little out of place here. What's the line of reasoning with having it in the deck?
I probably have different reasons than Logan does for including Dark Ritual, but like I said, I'm pretty rog pilled. Um, I like being able to ramp out early mana and develop my board pretty quickly in a game, and it feels like early mana advantage to play something like a Soul Ring, a Talisman, and a Mana Vault on my first 2 or 3 turns sets me up extremely well to be able to convert games later on as it goes on. But also the side piece to that is that if Shieldred on turn 3 is good, Shieldred on turn 2 has to be better, right?
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Enough of our creatures have black pips in the mana cost that we want to land in the early game, that being able to do a line where you go land Dark Ritual, Talisman, Lotho just makes your explosive starts that much better. So Dark Ritual is just one of those cards that is acceleration that also makes pips and kind of just makes all of our early game plays feel that much better.
Okay, Logan.
uh, I'm a I'm of the same vein, except instead of Shieldred on turn 2, I'd say Smothering Tithe on turn 2 is a little bit better. But yeah, the same, like, being able to deploy these faster and earlier is such a clutch that like possibility.
Okay, no, when you put it like that, that definitely makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, it's just an efficient piece of mana acceleration to kind of get your value grind started a little bit earlier. Because I think we've touched on this a good bit, is that the whole point of the deck is really just to sit and grind advantage while also slowly taxing our opponents to dust. So getting our game plan rolling a little bit quicker lets us kind of get into a position where we don't really overextend and then have no follow ups. because our whole plan is to put advantage engines down. So dark ritualing into talisman and fairy mastermind leaves us in a position where we have more mana and we have a card draw engine on the board.
Okay. Is there any other cards you'd like to call out, or any other last thoughts that you have about the deck?
The first one would be Beseech the Mirror, just because it is two Y'shtola triggers in one card. You beseech, you bargain it, you get yourself a Rhystic Study, Smothering Tithe, whatever it may be, and that's 4 damage right there. That like neat little interaction is very cute, and I love it. The other one is Lively Dirge, because I feel like a lot more people would probably just run the Entune, run the Reanimate. Um, it being rolled into one is nice because when it comes to Spree, it changes the mana cost. So
Hmm.
no matter what mode we're choosing, we're getting a Y'shtola trigger, and we
Okay.
have the added benefit of being able to find a bowman and a fairy mastermind. Like get back a bowman and a fairy mastermind, something along those lines. An acute interaction is with Emmett, you can lively dirge twice,
Okay. Yeah, I see
which
that.
is something I had the chance to pull off today, and it felt very amazing.
That does feel really nice.
Yeah, Lively Dirge in particular is one of those cards that's good, I think, in every stage of the game. Obviously, asking for 4 or 5 mana for the effect kind of limits when you can deploy it, but every stage of the game to Y'shtola is the mid game and the late game. And so when you can Lively Dirge and there isn't anything useful in your graveyard, if you can pay the 5, you're putting a Shouldered into play. Or say you need a Ranger Captain because there's a Turbo player, then you're putting that into play and getting a Mockingbird on top of that or an Esper Sentinel on top.
Yeah.
But also in the late game, if you've lost some of those value creatures, like say you decided to try to cast a Grand Abolisher or a Drannith Magistrate at one point and it was countered or removed from the board later, then now your Lively Dirge can add an Orcish Bowmasters to your graveyard and bring back your Drannith Magistrate or your Fairy Mastermind or your Archivist of Agma or whatever piece it happens to be. So it's a card that I'm almost never upset to see.
All right. I mean, I feel like we really got to do a good in-depth coverage of the deck and everything. I know we have seen the deck play on the channel a couple of times, and we'll be seeing it. We'll definitely end up seeing it more on the channel. I know I like the deck. I think it's really cool to see. It's not a deck I would ever play. It's definitely a deck I never would have built, but I do think it's a really sweet deck. What are some kind of like closing thoughts that you would have? Some kind of like reminders or just like things you want to say about it in general?
Ooh,
Ooh.
Oof, I walked into that one. Oh, I fucking walked into that one. Okay. Well, that's not coming out, so I hope everybody watching this loved to hear that.
Yeah,
Oh,
catgirls.
man.
They work in CEDH.
Think-
mhm.
Well, on that note, um, thank you both so much for coming here to talk about your Stola. Like I said, I think the deck is really fun, really sweet. It's fun to see it do its thing. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's enjoyable to play against because it is very much the opposite of everything I want to see in a game. But it's definitely
That's what I love to hear.
exactly. And it's definitely a sweet deck, and I like seeing it do its thing. I will say that I do think it's really cool to see Y'shtola really pop off and do its thing. It's just everything that my decks don't want to see. So, but again, thank you both so much for coming on and talking about your Stola. I know I had a fun time, and I think you guys have a fun time talking about it. And for everybody out there, thank you all so much for watching. If you like this content and you want to keep seeing more of it, please head down, hit that like and subscribe. If you want to show me more direct support, please head down to the description and check out the Patreon and the bonfire. I have links to them down there. Check out some awesome rewards and some awesome merch. Also, big shout out to my patrons, Nick Foles Go to 9, Sarah, and Vex M. The lineup had changed since I had recorded this video, so I wanted to release and make sure I credit everybody. So thank you all so much for your direct support. Any last final words that are not ooh woo from you two?
It just
I
brings me
just
so
want
much joy seeing the archetype that I wanted to build be as successful as it is.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I just want to once again shout out Ken Bauman and shout out our fellow Weather Boys.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to everybody there. And again, thank you all so much for watching, and we will see you all next time. Fucking ooh will.
He messaged me. Say ooh right now.